probably heard of this before. This is a psychedelic medicine called LSD.
Their improvement was evident immediately.
48% were completely abstinent.
These are powerful tools.
It could impact millions and millions of lives.
Because of their immense potential in curing some of the world's most challenging mental health disorders.
When a friend of mine first referenced psychedelics as a medicine, I thought, yeah, right, bro. Oh, I need my medicine. Give me my medicine right now. Here's the strange and interesting reason why psychedelics actually function as a medicine, why they aren't an addictive substance, and that they are tools for spiritual growth. For anything to have the potential to be addictive, it needs to follow a certain pattern. That is, it gives you something on the front end that's positive, but then there's sort of like this long tail of negative effect on the back end. So for example, if you're like me and you really enjoy your chips, that is something that has the potential to be addictive. Now the opposite is also a relevant factor. So things that tend to lead to growth in our life are things that tend to have some challenge, some letting go, some discomfort on the front end, but sort of a long tail of benefits on the back end. That could also be things like having that tough conversation with that person that you keep putting off and it's starting to spiral and turn into a bigger issue. And if that's you, pause this video and go do that right now. Now, I think that often when people think about psychedelics and how I did initially, they're thinking of it as this drug that gets you high to escape your problems, that leads to even more problems in your life, the pattern of addiction. Now, there are some substances that can have psychedelic effects that do make you feel good on the front end, and so those ones like ketamine and MDMA do have the potential for addiction. Other classic psychedelics like LSD, psilocybin, ayahuasca, and mescaline, the active ingredient of San Pedro and peyote cacti, are not addictive. Now, what I can say after several years of ceremonially using many different kinds of psychedelics is that it's often the really challenging journeys that give you the most benefit. So I had a mushroom ceremony with a therapist friend of mine, and during the ceremony, what came up for me wasn't ecstatic rainbows and fun, it was grief. I just sobbed and cried the whole time. Now, grief isn't a very pleasant emotion to be in necessarily, and so I went through the process, I went with the grief, I allowed myself to cry, and by the end, I felt light, I felt clear, I felt better, and in that way, it was therapeutic. So on the front end, it was unpleasant, but on the back end, it was very positive, and ever since then, I've had easier access to grief and to crying, and that has contributed to a greater sense of aliveness in my life. Another ceremony, I attended a mushroom ceremony with my partner at the time while we were in the middle of a breakup. Generally, when they talk about guidelines for psychedelic journeys, there's two things to consider, the set, so your mindset, and then the setting. The setting was fine, but what's often given as an example of a bad set going into a psychedelic journey is, say, if you've just broken up with your partner and you're still feeling really off about it. Well, I went into the journey anyway, knowing that it could bring up things about the breakup that could be really valuable for me or help me process it. Lo and behold, what happened during the journey was really intense pain and loss and grief, just the pain of the loss of going through that breakup. And so after that, I felt like it was a very smooth process for me to work through the breakup, and I contribute that partly to that ceremony because I had worked through a lot of the pain that was there for me. Another example. Now this is a very clear one with ayahuasca. With ayahuasca, it is absolutely horrible to go through the purging. I'm not gonna lie. Puking, diarrhea from ayahuasca is not pleasant at all. And they say that the purging is actually part of this cathartic healing release in the ayahuasca ceremony. And in my experience, that's true. Because I had an ayahuasca ceremony where I didn't have any sort of logical, clear insight come out of it. You know, frequently insights can be like, I really need to take care of myself, or, you know, I really have an important purpose to play in the world, or I can let go of that thing that happened to me in the past. But for me, I had no insight. All I had was just nausea I experienced for an hour before finally purging and getting it out. But the next day, I woke up, I got out of bed, I was feeling light, I was feeling clear, music sounded better, the sun was out, life felt better, I could appreciate the world more, I was more grounded, I had better access to joy. All of these are signs of having gone through and processed deep inner work. Interesting enough, you don't actually need to know what you're processing sometimes. It'll just kind of go through a process and you'll release some underlying trauma or thing that you're holding on to that needs to let go. So after all these experiences, when I hear people talking about, oh no, I'm scared of a bad trip, You know, I welcome the possibility of a bad trip. There's always, always, always something about these challenging experiences that has therapeutic potential for you. Always. And this is kind of a strange thing actually. But the amazing thing about psychedelics for therapeutic use is that whenever something comes up inside, there's always some nugget of wisdom, some insight, something to be cleared, some trauma to be processed, something like that. There's always some benefit to be gained from it, whatever comes up. And that's because psychedelics act. And this is what a psychedelic is, by the way. It's a non-specific amplifier. So that means it's an amplifier of subconscious material, whether that's like repressed parts of yourself. If you're the kind of person who hasn't cried in like 2 years or whatever, chances are you need to unlock grief because it's been suppressed. If you're someone who has trauma from the past and you're aware of it, but you're having trouble kind of getting access to it or letting it out through therapy, say talk therapy, maybe that's not effective for you, psychedelics can function as an amplifier for that unconscious material, so it can be brought to the surface, processed, and then let go once and for all. They actually get to the root of the problem. And when you process the emotions and the trauma, whatever may be coming up, or you get an insight from it and you integrate that insight into your life afterwards by listening to it and making changes that need to be made, it makes long-lasting changes in the quality of your life at the deepest level. Another key thing to note about the psychedelic experience is that they can often take on a mystical tone, or if you go deep enough, they're just full-blown mystical experiences. God encounters, entity encounters, going to other realms, the experience of dissolving from your body, becoming universal love, merging with God, whatever language you want to use to describe it. These medicines go so deep into your psyche that they sort of almost blast through the personal realm and enter what Stan Grof and Chris Beisch and other writers about psychedelics call the transpersonal realm. Now, if you want to hear about that, let me know. This is why psychedelics are the next level of self-development. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.